So, what about Leviticus? It's something that comes up a lot. That throughout the internet, people debating over what laws are still relevant and just all of that, right? So, here's the question: what are Christians to do about the Levitical laws? Are we still bound by them or not? Now, a simple answer is we aren't, and some that we are. So the way that it works with Leviticus specifically is that in Israelite culture, there were three categories of law, which there was ceremonial, there is civil, and there are moral laws. Now, that seems odd. Why are we making this distinction? Except that that also exists in the modern era with laws about murder. That's a moral law. Laws about how to give, how to present, receive, how to establish contracts. That's a civil restraint. When you get married, for instance, you have to go, you sign a bunch of paperwork, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's a civil concern. And then there are also ceremonial laws or restrictions or rules that you follow. Like, let's say if you go to a concert, in the back or somewhere in there, there's going to be rules of expected conduct, admissible dress, permitted objects. Like sometimes they'll say that don't bring firearms, don't bring sharp objects. You're not going to be allowed to get into a mosh pit at a symphony orchestra, for instance. Like there's certain but once you leave the confines of that event, those rules are no longer restricting upon you. You're no longer bound by them because you're no longer present in that environment. The same thing is true for the rules that you find in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. That throughout there are moral laws like do not kill and do not envy, do not things like that. And then there's rules about how you are to you have to build a railing on the side of your house in order to keep someone from falling off it. Like there's certain things that if you're not an Israelite citizen, they don't apply to you. There are certain things that living here in North America just don't apply to someone who lives in the desert of the Middle East because the environment's different and it's a lot easier to find water here. There's a lot there's certain circumstances that just make it those things don't necessarily apply. However, the question is, do we need to follow them anyway? Like mixed fabrics and kosher eating laws and tattoos and all those things that are in there. Are we required to follow those things? Or should I, as an individual, follow them? And I think I used to contend really heavily. No, we don't. We don't need to follow them, which that you shouldn't follow them, and that it's part of the old law that's been completed and fulfilled, and that we're no longer limited by those things. However, recently I was thinking kind of through it, and the answer I came to is different. And it's this. Maybe you should. Maybe I individually, maybe I should follow those guidelines. And the reason being is that, yes, there's the three categories of law that I established earlier, but there's also another reason why those laws exist. And it's that they demonstrate the wisdom of God in the world. That God guaranteed to his people, Israel, that if they were to follow those laws consistently and actually obey them, that they would demonstrate his wisdom and that they would see him that they would be seen by the nations around them as more wise than any other people around them, and that would itself would stand as a witness to the people around and draw them towards God as a nation of priests. So, am I saying do it? I'm not saying that. In fact, I'm saying no, you don't have to. What I am saying is maybe you should. If you feel like that's kind of a thing for you, like you're being tugged on, maybe you individually should. But it would be wrong of you to impose them on anyone else. Just because you say, you know what, I'm doing vegan, or I'm doing kosher, or I do not mix my fabrics, whatever, to impose that or to look down on other people who are not doing that is wrong. Don't do that. Alright? So, as an example, for instance, just kind of continuing, what would that look like in today's society if you were to do that? Now, if you didn't know, Seventh-day Adventists tend to have an opinion that we need to reincorporate all that stuff. So it could look like that. I'm not saying become a Seventh-day Adventist, but as far as like a practice, it could look that way. Stay away from Ellen G. White. Her teachings are kind of messy, but it could look like that. Another instance would be the Amish. See, I live in the Midwest now, and so there's signs all over the place. In fact, there are areas where if you're driving, there's a sign that says, watch out for horse-drawn carriages, because there's Amish in that environment. Mennonite as well. So it's something that you will see them. And you'll see Amish-built roofs, Amish-built barns, Amish-made noodles. If the name Amish is attached to something, it indicates something, and one is that it's old-fashioned, that it's probably all natural, or it's like less waste in its production, and that honest. It means that it was done in a more honest or authentic way. So it could look like that, and obviously, like, those are all great traits. Another cool thing about the Amish is they are very family-centered. You can't get on TikTok or YouTube anymore, but you know what? Their families are super well integrated, and they care about each other, and their whole communities work really hard together to make sure everyone has what they need. High levels of respect for one another. So that's something that it could look like that. It could also look like, I don't know if you know this, but B&H Photo, probably the largest retailer of like photographic, video, digital editing technology. They have a shop in New York City, a giant boutique, maybe one of the largest in the world, but they're owned by Orthodox Jews. And as a result, they close on the Sabbath, Friday evening to Saturday evening, which means like the most important hours really for a retail establishment, they are closed, and yet they are still one of the dominant players in that little niche retail market. And asked about it, and they said, like, we answer to a higher authority. You can't even order things off their website during those hours. They're serious about it. But because they're the best, you go to them. You'll wait till Sunday afternoon if you need to in order to get the equipment, the advice that you need. Chick-fil-A famously closed on Sundays. Hobby Lobby arguing all the way to the Supreme Court that we are not going to kill children. We're not going to do it. We're not going to sponsor the death of children. And then In-N-Out Burger, if you haven't been there, California boy. Growing up, they were always the number one place. If you, like in high school, whatever, you wanted to get a summer job or you wanted to get a job in general, you wanted In-N-Out, because even though the minimum wage is down here at like $6.25, I think, they were paying people $10 and $11 an hour already over that. So we're like, man, if we could get in there, like they treat their people right, their food is the best quality, the restaurant is clean, like those are instances where it's like you can see that yes, they're Christians, but they're also the best in their field, and they've used that platform of like, listen, we're the best. You can go to Popeyes for your chicken sandwich, but it's not as good. And they're not going to serve you as well as we will. Just legit. So they've used that platform of expertise and precision and greatness they've sent to point you towards like, listen, yeah, and you know what? We also have a God worthy of glory.